Live here this morning on the Saturday edition of Sidelines, and we are in Charlotte, North Carolina, the Queen City. I call it the Clean City, especially coming from Memphis. Man, there are no tires on the side of the road. Just what a beautiful.
What are you saying about Memphis, Rob?
Yeah, well, Memphis they need to clean the city up. My God, I love my city, but you ride around.
Run for mayor, I think.
It's count the tires and stuff like that. But what an incredible city. My son Wilson lives up here, and we're up here to visit with him and people. And Vegas, Tate Davis, went to dinner with him last night. Awesome time. Got a lot of basketball to talk about. Dave Tompkins in the Low Country over in Beaufort, South Carolina, is going to bat in the leadoff position with us. And Doug Dean will check in from over in the Black Belt of Alabama. He's up there last weekend of the deer season in Alabama, so we'll hopefully have him join us for our thoughts. And then our executive producer, who knows a lot about sports as well.
Nothing.
Brenden
Not
Martin.
deer season. I don't know anything about
during the season. You do. But we're going to be talking a lot about these SEC basketball games today. And, of course, we got the Super Bowl tomorrow. So, hey, get pen and paper handy. Let's go.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
Right, Dave, this SEC basketball schedule. The other night we had the IBOB, is what Kevin Skarbinski calls it, the Iron Bowl of basketball. I thought that game, Alabama is a really good basketball team. Auburn won 99-81. Tennessee keeps playing better. The more other players step up and play with Dalton Connect, the better Tennessee looks. We spent Thursday night and part of yesterday over in Knoxville. But Rick Barnes, Tennessee fans to a man, will say, yeah, but wait till we get to the tournament. All those years, Rick Barnes, one Final Four appearance with Kevin Durant when he was at Texas. Then you've got South Carolina. Nobody saw that one coming. Picked 14th in the preseason. So kind of unravel where we are to this point in SEC basketball.
What a strong league. I can't remember the SEC ever being this strong. You've got Gonzaga, Kentucky today at Rupp, and it's kind of a must-win for both teams. It's certainly a must-win for Gonzaga. I mean, if they lose, they go deeper into the bubble. Yeah, but kind of Kentucky needs to win too. I mean, Kentucky is 5 or 6 in the SEC. I thought Auburn looked fantastic on Wednesday night. I really did, and I'm looking forward to their game today against Brendan's team, playing down in Gainesville. It's just a hell of a lineup today in the SEC, and I think February is going to be just a fascinating month for the league. And everyone jockeying, position for the SEC tournament, for March Madness. It's just must-watch TV.
One of the things about Dalton Connect at Tennessee is you think about a shooter like a Steph Curry, and you think back in the day, Barry Goheen at Vanderbilt. That guy would just rain them in all day long. We don't see the great shooters much anymore. And I brought this up with Brenden yesterday. Dalton Connect started out his career at the University of Northern Colorado, UNC.
Go Bears.
Go Bears. Go Bears.
I went to college in Greeley. Come on.
I'm from Oaxaca. Go Bears.
Go Bears.
Yeah, that's right.
I went to college in reality. Let me tell you, on Wednesday, Slaughter Day in Greeley, and it's where Montford Beef is, which is, one of the biggest beef producers in the country, and it smells awful on Wednesday.
I didn't know that.
Well,
that may have been why he left.
Well, that and I couldn't make the grades, so I had to go to class. But other than that, it was fine.
I was thinking about Dalton Connect. Let
me tell you,
come to Tennessee.
They call it reality because it's
reality.
a little rough.
Well, the best shooter plays for Iowa, and she ain't a boy.
Yes.
The best shooter in the world right now is Caitlin Clark.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was talking with Matt Dean, who's from Davenport, Iowa, went to Drake. He said she is a self-made player. I think she went to Westside High School in Des Moines and has come up there and she is the best shooter. People say, a female version of Steph Curry who played at Davidson. And we were driving in the ride from Knoxville to Charlotte, especially Knoxville. Well, when you get to Sevierville, just outside of town to Hickory, that's some serious mountains. I used to go to camp up at Camp Deerwood in Brevard, North Carolina. We'd fly to Asheville, Memphis, Atlanta, Asheville. God, it's gorgeous. I've always come from Auburn, Atlanta to Charlotte or flown in. First time I'd driven through that mountain pass, I mean, that was serious. And I was
pretty.
Thinking, we saw the Davidson University signs, as we were coming into Charlotte. But looking at this league, we might get 9 teams in.
Yep.
And the Big Ten, Franz Beard, I love it. He always says the Big Ten has 14 teams. They'll get 21 bids to the NCAA tournament. They play good basketball. And looking at the rankings right now, UConn number 1. Who's going to knock them out of their perch? They're the defending national champion. But here's the other one. Purdue at number 2, and they never really do much in the tournament. How good is the Big Ten compared to the SEC?
Well, I mean, look at last year, and Purdue lost to Fairleigh Dickinson in the first round. So it was the second time a 16 seed beat a 1 seed. I did watch Purdue play Wisconsin in Madison last Sunday, and they did look good. And I think what's different about this Purdue team relative to Purdue teams in the past is they've got a really, really good point guard. And, and the tournament is a guards tournament and all that. So I think they have a chance this year of advancing, but it's still the loom larger question is the Big Ten. And if you're not Michigan State, you don't advance far in the tournament. And that's been going on for decades. Well,
the last national championship the Big Ten has was the Flintstones in 2000, Michigan State. And Tom Izzo is regarded, and he's a hell of a coach. I think they've been to 8 Final Fours since.
I want to say 7, but yeah, close. I
mean, 7 or 8. Yeah. Okay, so great run. I mean, you look at Alabama has never been to the Final Four. Auburn's been one time. Tennessee, never to the Final Four. Florida, about 5 times with 2 national championships. And Arkansas has been multiple times, and LSU. But other than, and South Carolina, in 2017 went to the Final Four. Dave, when you start looking at this league this year, Ole Miss is another one that comes out. Are you surprised? I mean, Chris Beard wins everywhere he goes. University of Arkansas, Little Rock. He won at Texas Tech. He was winning at Texas, and things didn't work out. Hey, Ole Miss took a chance, and it's working out.
Rob Anderson, I'll get to your comment in a minute. Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's really overnight. It's become a coaches conference. I mean, there are just so many great basketball coaches in the SEC, and I mean, there've always been a small handful, but you can always count them on one hand in the SEC. Now you need 2 hands to count the great coaches in the SEC, and we're seeing the results of it now. I mean, it is not just a football conference. I mean, it is a legitimate basketball conference. If I'm ranking them, Charles Barkley was on the game the other night. He says Big 12 is the best, and he's probably right.
I agree with that.
The SEC is right behind there. I would say tied with the Big East for number 2.
Well, you think about the Big East: Creighton, Marquette, UConn. UConn's got 5 national championships. The women have 11?
11, I think, yeah.
So, I mean, I don't think it's a stretch to say that UConn men's and women's basketball is the best 1-2 punch in America.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is basketball U. It's with all apologies to Duke and UCLA and Kentucky, UConn is basketball U. And I guess you got to consider Tennessee when you consider the women's teams.
Well, but the success, Tennessee never getting to the Final Four. I think they've been to an Elite Eight one time, and they've had a lot of talented players up there. So, all right.
And how did a team with Bernard King and Ernie Grunfeld not make the Final Four?
Well, you got to wonder. Charles Barkley never won a championship in the NBA. I mean, it's the same. It's the same thing. I'm with you, and I think you look at and this is funny to hear Brenden and Buddy and Franz talk about that Florida team that won back-to-back 06 and 07 national championships, and they'll tell you that when they break it down, those guys were not regarded as a bunch of NBA future superstars. I mean, we all knew about Noah because of his father, Yannick Noah, the great tennis player from France. We all watched him play.
I've said it before on this show, and go way back to when I was a kid at watching the UCLA teams, but they had an unfair advantage. I mean, they had a very unfair recruiting advantage, and it was kind of NIL before NIL. But that Florida team, 06 and 07, that was the most well put together basketball team I've ever seen. I mean, each player had a role. They all played great defense. And it was not just their starting five. It was all 8 that played, and they were just a joy to watch. And I'm hoping the SEC. I don't know if there's a team like that in the SEC this year, but I'm really hoping that the SEC can produce another team like that Florida team, so that we can kind of move. We can usurp the Big 12 as the best basketball conference.
Yeah, because you look at Houston last year. Remember, the odds of Auburn and Alabama both playing at Legacy Arena in Birmingham. That was pretty cool. First half, Auburn's all over Houston. Second half, Kelvin Sampson's teams play great defense. And then you saw what Kansas did to Houston last week. But Kansas has still lost 3 or 4 games within the Big 12.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You look at Kansas, and they had that game there, they're at Allen Fieldhouse against Houston that they win, then they lose their next game. I mean, these games really take a lot out of the players physically and emotionally. Look at North Carolina. So they have the signature win against Duke and look like, one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the country in that game. But sandwiched around that are 2 just pathetic losses to Georgia Tech and then the other night in the Dean Dome to Clemson.
Clemson, yeah, that one, both of those. The Georgia Tech was like a 1 or 2 point loss, I think. Yeah, and I'm with you. Jay Shire, the coach at Duke, and he's got him in the top 10. Of course, Hubert Davis, North Carolina, hell of a hire. I mean, there's no question that's working out well. One of the games today, Tennessee's playing at Texas A&M. Buzz Williams always gets a full 40 out of his team. They don't have the superstars, but they only got 2 guys this year that really score. Is Tennessee walking on thin ice today?
I think so. I think that's a trap game. I wagered way too much when I was a teenager, so I had to quit gambling. If I still gambled, I would definitely bet on the Aggies today. I think that's a trap game.
Yeah, I mean, it just something about the man in the 3-piece suit, Buzz Williams. I love that guy. He is like the what Arthur Miller wrote, "Death of a Salesman."
Yep.
I mean, he just looks like
Willie
the
Loman.
Yeah, he looks like the old salesman on the road. Alabama at LSU today. I want to throw this out there. Nate Oates, people want to hate this guy, but he is a tough, hard ass, and his teams, they play really they score a lot. Auburn getting that win the other night, that was huge. No fights in the game. No, look, guys are gonna when you're playing your own brother or a sibling, sister in a sport, you're gonna get a little bit feisty. I mean, that's just part of it. People have got to, in this country, have got to quit getting their panties in a wad when guys get in each other's face. That's testosterone. That's part of competition. But that Iron Bowl of basketball is great. I'd love to see UAB make a comeback. And, you think about for a long time, the SEC, I mean, Kentucky was so dominant. I'm going to throw this question at you, Dave. When Mike Slive pushed everybody in the conference to really ramp up their basketball programs, they did, and they've done a great job of it. But Kentucky, last national championship, 2012, last Final Four, I think 2015. There's no doubt they have the most passionate college basketball fan base in America. I believe that's why they're madder than hell that Calipari has got an $80 million golden parachute. I just think it's the same. It's the basketball equivalent of Texas A&M giving $75 million guaranteed to Jimbo Fisher.
I completely agree. And Coach Calipari's had a great career that goes back to UMass and Marcus Camby teams and stuff.
Yeah.
And he did real well at the beginning at Kentucky. I got to know him a little bit when I was at Churchill Downs. But the last 8 or 9 years has just been bewildering because it's not for lack of talent. They have tremendous talent. And you look at their team this year when they beat who did they beat? North Carolina in Atlanta. And that team left, okay, this is a Final Four team. I mean, this is Coach Cal 101 with the mix of the veterans and the youth and all the talent. And, they got 2 7-footers that play. But they can't win important games and they lose games at home. And I'm very interested to watch the Gonzaga Kentucky game today at 4 Eastern at Rupp because, Mark Few needs to win this game. I mean, he's never missed a tournament, and that's an incredible streak that he has. He's all-time winning percentage and all that kind of stuff, but they're in danger, and it's not a very good Gonzaga team relative to Gonzaga teams of the past. Yeah. So if Gonzaga pulls it off today, I think they're in the tournament, even if they don't win the Western WCC. But it's just another indictment on Kentucky basketball, and I having lived in Louisville for as long as I did, I know those fans, and they are furious. Yeah. They are absolutely furious. They kind of remind me of, the Alabama fans during, Mike Dubose and Frangione and all that, how frustrated we were. Because Kentucky's supposed to be dominant in basketball, just like Alabama's supposed to be dominant in football.
Yeah. And again, you go back and you look at conferences when you had a dominant team for a long time. Then when other teams start ramping it up, sometimes they don't answer the bell. And I mean, Kentucky, Calipari, UMass, we know what he did at Memphis. Memphis fans, it was a great run, but it took him 4 or 5 years to really get it going at Memphis. And then he had them on fire and took that Kentucky job. And I can understand that, but you never want to lose a guy like that. I just think you start paying these coaches so much money that they're done. You've got to have people motivated. You got to pay them enough, but you still got to want to get up out of bed in the morning and go to work. That's a problem. It's too much money for Calipari.
I think there's an interesting case study in college basketball coaches, and that's Shaka Smart. So Shaka takes VCU to the Final Four and the whole havoc defense and his version of 40 minutes of hell. So then he gets the big job and the big paycheck at Texas and all the endorsement money and everything, and they suck. I mean, they had a lot of talent, but they were not a good basketball team, and they parted amicably. And now he's at Marquette, and they're that's Elite Eight, if not Final Four potential again at Marquette. And that's just an interesting case study. How some coaches, they're fit for mid majors, and maybe Mark Few was a smart guy all along because he's gotten so many offers to go, coach at major programs and stuff. And he says, no, I'm happy here in Spokane. I'm going to keep coaching at Gonzaga.
Well, you're right about that. These coaches, and then you think about, look at Arkansas after Nolan Richardson was forced out. How many coaches did they have to go out and get that were hot in the NCAA tournament? They got the coach from Toledo. They got Mike Pelfrey. Teams get hot in the NCAA tournament. Yeah. And that makes their coach suddenly super hot. Where is the coach from St. Peter's that 2 years ago was the darling of the national?
He's doing well. He went back to his alma mater, Seton Hall, and Seton Hall is the the giant killer of the Big East.
Yeah.
And they're probably going to make the tournament. And that's a team that can, could pull off an upset or two and find themselves in the Sweet 16. I'm forgetting his name now, but he played for Seton Hall and then was the coach at St. Peter's. Hollowell or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because remember his contract was only $200,000 a year. Kentucky on that particular team had all but 2 players on the roster with NIL deals in excess of $200,000. You know what I noticed after that game? There were only a couple of Kentucky players. Sheboy was one of them, Oscar Sheboy, and one other player that looked visibly upset about the loss.
Yeah.
Damn it, we better be careful with that. It's no different than paying these coaches. If you are guaranteed, it's like tenure for a professor. I do not understand that.
It absolutely is. We've talked about the Stanford athletic department, and a buddy of mine is on the board of trustees of Stanford University, and he was at their annual meeting this year, and he said, "Man, even academically, it's sad because of tenure."
Well, I gotta ask you this:
you just mail it in, and there's no incentive to perform.
Yeah, and I have watched Stanford from afar for a long time, and I remember not too many years ago they had $360 million in an athletic endowment. A lot of schools' endowments aren't that big total. So you think about, they always would win the Sears Cup trophy as the best overall men's and women's athletic program in America. How the hell does this happen other than stuff like tenure? We talk about colleges with these bloated contracts for coaches and all. Well, state universities, a lot of these employees, they're all state government employees, but the private funding, Auburn and Alabama don't get any money for athletics from the state. They're all self-funded. And there's a reason for that, because that way they don't have to take a bunch of crap from state legislatures. And not that they would, but you don't leave that open, that risk out there. I sit there and I really think a lot of these administrators, they spend money like the federal government does. We'll just go print more. And that is a problem. Texas A&M, the private sector, $80, $85 a barrel oil is what it takes for the OPEC nations to balance their budgets. That's what you got to watch. The Permian Basin in Texas and New Mexico produces on average 4.2 million barrels of oil per day.
Wow.
66% of that money, the state oil money, 66% every year goes to Austin. 1/3 to College Station. The fact that they are just being so negligent and just blowing money like that. If I'm an A&M fan, look, can anyone argue that A&M fans aren't among the most passionate and loyal in the world? No. So this is not bashing A&M's fans. It's the administrator. Ross Bjork slid out of town before the hangman came to take him up there and got to Ohio State. And now, last night, I'm watching Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly steps down at UCLA to take the offensive coordinator job at Ohio State. But you know what? You talk to anyone who's ever been to UCLA, their facilities are third world. Believe it or not, all that money, Hollywood and all like that, that's why they had no choice but to join the Big Ten for now. And I'll get to that later.
Well, I think and you really see it play out in the tournament, the one and done nature of the tournament. Yeah. And there's this big difference between I hope we can win versus I need for us to win. Because when it's I need for us to win, it's like, it's like St. Peter's versus Kentucky. It's like, okay, their coach said, all right, there's one way we're going to win this game. So let's just go execute the one way. If it doesn't work, we'll lose by 30. Yeah. But there's a 1 in 10 chance it will work and we will win and we will advance. Same last year with Princeton going to the Sweet 16. Yeah. It's why Ivy League teams tend to do well in the tournament in terms of, they'll win a game or something. And how could I don't know what the Ivy League's, overall win percentage is in the tournament. And it's probably not over 500, but it's certainly a lot higher than what it should be because, based on the quality of the athlete that plays in the Ivy League. And it's because the coach, the team, the culture are thinking we need to win this game. And so how can we win this game? What's the one way we can do it?
Yeah.
And I think it really, when you get paid all that money, and Jimbo Fisher is a classic case, and then you have this enormous, escape clause. I hope we can win. I'd like for us to win. It's not I need for us to win.
Yeah. Well, the great programs, the players know they're going to win. There's a lot of fans walking around waiting for the other shoe to drop. The great ones, they are used to it. But if you work hard, you should feel not a sense of entitlement like, welfare program, but I'm talking about you have worked so hard in your mind. You're going, I know how to win. Some schools, it is it's dysfunctional. They don't know how to win, and they're looking for excuses to lose. And I'm telling you, what Chip Kelly, that guy's a hell of a coach. He had four years at Oregon, 4 straight BCS bowls. Like a lot of these guys, their egos are so big. Nothing wrong with ego, but keep it in check. He goes to the NFL. You can't run wide. If you can't run between the tackles in the NFL as a running back, you're not going to make it. I mean, you probably won't even be drafted. And I think the game, because the outside, those guys are so fast, they seal everything off. We talk about, and Doug Dean's going to join us here in about 5 minutes, or less than 5 minutes from over at the hunting camp. And we're going to get into more SEC basketball, but looking at what is going on with SEC and Big Ten, Dave, I think it's good that they're collaborating, because these are the two most powerful forces that move the market. This is like the NASDAQ and the Dow getting together, or the NYMEX or the Dubai Mercantile Exchange or ICE on commodities and oil. What, though, do you really think will happen? In my opinion, Greg Sankey will be the smartest man in that room, and he will be the biggest influencer.
Gosh, that's a hard question to answer. And my answer will be just pure speculation.
Get the crystal ball out.
The crystal ball out. Here we go. Got my my karma of my little weird hat today.
I love it.
The doctor I had a hernia procedure a few weeks ago. The doctors cleared me to play golf, so I got my little crazy golf hat on. I kind of see a future where the college football bifurcates, and there's one league of the best 48 teams, or the SEC and the Big Ten, or maybe the Big 12, and then there's everybody else. And maybe there's the national champion comes from the elite league, or maybe they have their parallel seasons, and then there's a David and Goliath championship game or something like that, and David wins 1 out of every 8 years, and that's fantastic and great news, or something like that. We'll see. But if I were in the NCAA, and I would feel like I need this league to start working better. Not I want or I hope for it to work, but I need for it to work better. And I'm like, okay, we need to create a story here, because if not, the story is going to be created for us. We need to create some story out of college football, given everything that's happened with the power leagues and NIL and the transfer portal. The story is being created, the story is being thrust upon them versus them creating the story. So
yeah. Well, the thing is that, again, Jackie Sherrill 32 years ago pointed it out at the Touchdown Club in Memphis. I was there. He saw 64 teams. Now I think 65, because Notre Dame's going to come into that group. But the bifurcation of college athletics, I think what we're going to see in 2 or 3 years, I'll predict it now, and in 2 or 3 years we'll be on the show. I'm going to be right or I'm going to be wrong. But I think after a year or two of cross-country travel for all the non-revenue sports, everything but football and basketball in some cases, women's volleyball Wednesday night, Oregon at Rutgers, they get snowed in on a snowstorm, can't get out for 3 or 4 days, fall behind academically. We may revert back to the old conference model there, okay? But what I do think will happen is college football will be an island unto itself. It's sort of like that's the way it needs to have always been with Title IX, with scholarships. That's why it was the death of a lot of sports in the SEC. Wrestling was a great sport for a long time. Sweet Umbaugh at Auburn won 39 SEC championships. In 1981, Tom Milkovich had Auburn in the top 10 in wrestling. And boom, Coach Dye comes athletic director and says, we had 85 scholarships. They count toward the men's in football, so you got to take away some men's sports to balance out the women's. Again, not an attack on women's sports. Hell, I got 2 girls, 2 boys. That's not it. But damn it, the terms of endearment, Dave, and you know this, follow the money trail, don't they?
Well, if I were the head of the NCAA and I was like setting this up for the long term,
yeah,
knowing that there'd be some short term loss in going toward long term, I would make all the leagues. I would make all the leagues kind of local, regional. So the traveling time is you can get there by bus or car or whatever in a couple hours, and so I would have the season last about 2/3 as long as all the sports seasons last now. Then I would have a tournament, and it would be like March Madness. And so every sport has a truncated season, and Mark's talking about bifurcate, so we'll talk about truncate now. A truncated season, and then it has an extended tournament, and there's some sort of TV deal for the season, and then there's a much bigger TV deal for the tournament, because let's give the NCAA some credit. I mean, March Madness works. Yeah. I mean, it is beautiful. I mean, that is the best 3 weeks all year in sports, and so just replicate that model across all the sports. And so if you're in the SEC, it's the classic SEC, and there's a Southwest Conference, and there's an Atlantic Coast Conference that doesn't go all the way up to Syracuse, and there's a Pac-12 conference or Pac-8 conference that doesn't go to Arizona or whatever. And you have these smaller conferences, and they play each other once, and that's your season. You have one out of conference game, and then 7 games in conference or something like that, and then you have a tournament. Yeah, and I think that would work for every sport.
Well, this is where I see. So you go to classic Southwest Conference, classic Big 12, classic ACC. Football is its own deal. You put those 85 scholarships out there, and then Title IX. I think it all works out because you have an equal number for men's sports, and you can bring back wrestling. You can bring back other sports. There's no men's soccer in the SEC. There's no men's lacrosse. I mean, Florida, I think, plays in the ACC for lacrosse, and lacrosse is a pretty popular sport. But the one here's the thing that gets me in a business, you've got to cut the fat. If you have excess losses in certain areas, you got to get rid of them. A good university president will come in and cut the fat. But what we see is budget appropriations go out, 50 million here, 100 million there. No one ever says, we only needed 90 of it. Here's 10 million back. They'll find something to spend it on. AKA, when I ride in from Parkin to Memphis, these solar farms, people are selling what would be traditionally rice, cotton, beans, and there's solar farms going up along I-40 right outside of Memphis. It's ridiculous. If those things worked, the private sector would embrace them. But the federal government is the biggest backer. Just watch that. Connect the dots.
I mean, just and this is a tiny little micro, anecdote, but I think it's important. So the most important men's sport at West Point is wrestling. I mean, we're always in the top 10 in wrestling. I mean, we have been for forever. And then you look at the people, the guys at West Point who wrestled, and they become the best officers. They become the best corporate CEOs. So they're a corporate CEO, so they make a lot of money. So they're giving back a lot of money to the school, supporting the school. So it's this virtuous cycle that just perpetuates. The best, the most important women's sport at West Point is tennis. And you look at the women's tennis team, and they have cranked out like corporate CEOs, startups, founders that have become, big successes and stuff like that. And so it's a little micro example, but it really speaks to, what are the values that make a good wrestler? Okay. All right. So that that sport by itself is not going to get a lot of TV money and near-term money for a university. But if you're going to be good at wrestling, I mean, you got to have the right stuff as a human being in terms of your character and your values. So you're going to do well in life. You're going to if from Auburn and become Tim Cook. Yeah. And you're going to give a lot of money back to the school. And so I don't know if I were a university president, or particularly if I were a league commissioner or head of the NCAA, I would start thinking a lot more long-term.
Well, I will say this. When Shug Jordan was the football coach at Auburn in the offseason, you didn't have strength training year-round with weights. In fact, it was frowned upon by a lot of people that it would take away your flexibility. Shug Jordan, you had to either you had to swim or wrestle or both, okay? And I'll tell you, there's a school in Memphis, MUS, my high school, Christian Brothers' biggest rival. Back in 2001, they did away with spring practice. And that coach, Bobby Austin, who just retired, said, you will either play lacrosse, participate in track and field, or do both. Because there's all these summer camps these kids are going to anyway. And you know what I'm saying? Multi-sport athletes are better. Since then, MUS has won 4 state championships and had 4 runner-ups. The bottom line is that any coach, I heard Bill Oliver one time say when he took over for Terry Bowden midway through the season in 98, he said, look, we got 3 hours allocated for practice. If we're done in an hour and 15 minutes, then we're done. We're not going to stay out there. You see this happen a lot of time when I'm telling you, swimming and running, garbage yardage, people just doing it. You got to have a sense of purpose to everything that you do. As far as wrestling goes, yeah, the wrestling, college wrestling, Iowa State, Stillwater, Oklahoma, where the College Wrestling Hall of Fame is, I totally agree with you. And where the ear pads, because you're going to have cauliflower ears that look like country ham at Cracker Barrel, if you don't. But I totally am with it. We need to bring back these sports like wrestling. Wrestlers are the toughest. Look, you find a college football player who is a wrestler in high school as a lineman, my God, their leverage, their way they can use their hands and flexibility. The West Point experience, and that's something we need to think about. The student athletes, the government, that's the United States Military Academy, but it's still a lot of private funding that goes there. No one really talks about that. Okay. So, I mean, and Doug Dean's going to jump in here with us, but you find the schools investing. We need to bring back the hardcore sports like wrestling. Doug Dean. All right.
I'm going to mention one more thing on wrestling, then I'll be quiet and because it's a short show today. So the best entrepreneur from West Point, I think, is going to be a guy named Ryan Hetrick, who a young kid. And he's got something right now that's just focused on women's hockey in college, but he is turning NIL on its side. I mean, he's got something it's really going to shake, kick the shit out of NIL. And it was a wrestler. The best corporate CEO from West Point was a wrestler, Steve Cannon, and Steve's in the Wrestling Hall of Fame in Stillwater. Yeah. And I don't know, it's just something there, and it's not just confined to wrestling, but it's those do hard things sports that really create the character and values that create long-term success for that individual, and then they give back to the school. And so I think schools should be thinking long-term.
I totally agree. Doug Dean, 12 point, 14, 16, 172 Boone and Crockett score. What do we got?
Just watched Mother Nature all morning, saw about 15 deer, but they were all beneficiaries of my mercy this morning. Hey, have y'all covered Taylor Swift, and which is what the Super Bowl's all about?
We're waiting for you.
We've been waiting on you because you are a Swiftie.
First of all, before I dive into that, Brenden, I got a lot of love for you, man. You're a great producer. Love your opinions and takes. We can't be friends today, Brenden. I'm sorry. The last time Auburn.
That's okay, Dougie. That's all right. That's what it's. I got your picture up. Your big love shot there, buddy. I want you to give me some props there. That's all I got is the Swiftie love for you.
That's awesome. But Auburn has not, and there's been a few pretty good Auburn teams. They have not gone into Gainesville and won since, as Bruce Pearl said, since Bill Clinton was president and Monica was still his intern at that point.
Wow.
So I'm rooting for the
Holy
law of
cow.
averages to finally rear its head today, and I would expect Brenden to vehemently oppose that outcome. But I'm Rob and guys, I'm real happy with how Bruce has, I guess, what I would call cultivated this team game by game. We still have a fan base that processes basketball season like football fans, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to lose a few games, and this year I don't see a single. I think Dave and you guys were talking about that. I don't see a single dominant team, which will only serve to make March Madness even madder and wilder, with some directional schools winning and making it to the Final Four like last year.
Well, I don't either. I mean, other than is UConn. I mean, UConn won the national championship last year, Doug.
They did.
And survived a 5-game losing streak.
Yeah, but I guess for my money, if you make it to the Final Four, that's a banner in your building, and it means something. Now, as for Taylor and Kelsey, I'm certainly not anyone you should consult about your dating life, Rob. I'm happy to have long since been off the market, but Kelsey needs to be very careful here. If this romance does not go well in the long run,
yeah,
Taylor Swift can buy the Kansas City Chiefs and move them overseas.
You know what? And you know what?
She could do that.
And here's the deal: she's vindictive like that, so she might just go ahead and do that. So and then she'll write a song about it.
Right? I was going to say write a song first, but
yeah.
He is the song.
And Lane Kiffin, by the way.
Written. He is already a tragic figure in one song she's got in the can, and probably he's the lifelong romance in some other song. One way or the other, Taylor. I mean, Kelsey, you're going to be in a song. You just need to make sure it's the right song.
And she's already pissed off at that kid in Florida who's tracking her, carbon emissions coming back from Tokyo. You don't want her boat up.
So speaking of tracking, we usually just track airplanes about football coaching hires, right? So now everybody's going to be tracked when she finishes her concert in Tokyo. I was reading that she will be whisked, love that word, whisked to a private jet and should arrive in Vegas comfortably. They'll probably have a landing strip right outside the stadium for her private jet, and she should be there comfortably, probably fatigued, jet lagged, but I cannot imagine but either Taylor or the powers that be allowing this Super Bowl to go off without at least, what's the over under 30 camera shots of Taylor in a skybox?
Kimberly had an interesting idea this week about with Taylor and stuff, and like, okay, so you're a beer company, and you pay whatever million for your spot, and you have multiple spots. Is there a secondary market now to sell your spot to some brand that caters to a Swiftie? And how much would that brand be willing to pay over premium so they can have they can pitch the Swifties during the Super Bowl?
Name, image, and likeness. Speaking of cameras and a lot of shots of Taylor Swift, which, by the way, I have no problem with. I don't have any hate for her. She's been a megastar. She's not on many of my playlists, but the Super Bowl itself, I don't know if y'all covered this. Wait for it. 165 cameras, augmented reality, drones that fly over the fountains at Bellagio. And then when they get to the game itself, there will be I can't wait to see this, some graphics about offensive efficiency or whatever it may be. You'll see the camera like float through that graphic, almost 3D, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so visually, I'll probably need a few ibuprofen after the game, but visually it should be camera angles and intrigue visually that we haven't seen in any Super Bowl to date.
Well, I am a drone pilot, Doug, which I know that makes you happy. Yeah, I've been flying drones for about 12 years.
No kidding. What's the application? Do you take a lot of camera shots or what?
It's all scenics and beauties, right? So it replaces the helicopter. So it saves you a ton of money. Yeah. So and then it's a drone show. which is just a collective of drones that has, somebody on the ground. So that's where we see all those crazy, like, every drone's got a different light bulb, and then it fires, and it's all computer program, algorithm, that kind of thing. But I think what they're doing is, I think what you're saying is that they're projecting a hologram into the sky, and then the drone's going to fly through the hologram, and then we're going to get the POV, or point of view perspective, of the drone coming through. But I'm guessing if there's multiple drones in the air, and then I also did live sports TV for 15 years. So I was the slow motion replay guy in TV trucks and all that stuff forever. And so we'll probably see a series of these drones, from their POVs, which they'll marry together in some sort of a cool, like, 3D animated space where we'll feel like, we're drone to drone to drone to drone to drone to drone. So you'll get the perspective that you're jumping from camera to camera to camera in a smooth sort of a deal, which is just a bunch of overkill, if you ask me. Yeah, the NFL is the WWE on acid now. So I mean, it's all predictable. If you guys don't think Kansas City and the Swifties aren't going to win tomorrow, then you're all wrong. It's the way it's going to work. There's no way Taylor Swift is losing the Super Bowl.
The whole Super Bowl, we all understand this, is gluttonous, hedonistic, and everything about it. I'm not particularly fired up about Usher, the halftime show, but most people are. But I don't even watch NFL much throughout the season until it gets to the playoffs. But I'm pretty fired up about this Super Bowl. I got all the youngins coming over, Rob, and we are, my son-in-law that you've met, Kyle, I've appointed him Super Bowl games czar, and his job is I'll put the money up, a few $100s, and he's going to create all of these prop bets for our party that everyone, who scores the most points per quarter, which player, how many camera shots of Taylor Swift are there, and then obviously who's the ultimate winner. Speaking of which, I can't talk myself into betting against Mahomes and the Chiefs if I'm just trying to be a smart better. But you can't have a more stark contrast between the MVP QB and the last player chosen in the draft, Brock Purdy. I think that's pretty cool.
This is my heart talking. This is my heart talking. You got Travis and Tay. Okay, so on the other side, there's a new sort of BFF relationship, and that's Christian McCaffrey and Condoleezza Rice. And I would love to see the 49ers win. And then Christian and Condi get together, both have strong Stanford ties. And Condi's still there, and go back to Stanford and say, wake the F up. And let's become Stanford University again in terms of athletics, in terms of academics and everything. So I am pulling super hard for the 49ers. I'm afraid you're right, Doug.
I've got Kansas City fatigue. I'm probably not alone in that.
Well, the bottom line is there's 23 or 33 billion that's going to be bet on the Super Bowl tomorrow. Is that a low figure or a high figure?
I think it's actually 60 something. It's like 68 or something like that.
Okay, so it's more than it was last year. We know. And I would love to know the per capita number of bets coming out of the state of Alabama, because no state bets more on college football than Alabama. And in the Southern schools, you always knew on the post-game show, people wanted the Slippery Rock Lehigh score or whatever. That's a guy that's betting. I mean, but there's nothing wrong with that. This is a free country. Guys, the Super Bowl, the one thing about it is, you're right. They're right. It was bad there for a while. There were a lot of blowouts. We've had some decent games lately, but Patrick Mahomes, 6 years as a starter, 6 times he's been in the AFC Championship game, and this is his 4th Super Bowl. Doug, is McCaffrey the best player, though, on the field? I think he runs between the tackles like a guy as big as Derrick Henry.
I guess like the great oh gosh, help me, Joe Witt, not Junior, still in the league.
Joe Senior.
Joe Witt. I've told this one-liner many times on your show. I was asking him about how are we going to recruit bigger and faster linebackers, and his answer seems so vanilla, but I have gone back to it over and over and reflected on it. He said, well, that's all great, Doug, but some of those guys look flashy in a camp, but I just want a football player. To me, Christian McCaffrey, we know about his talent, and I'm sure he's got all the measurables, but by God, he's a football player.
Warrior.
You put him on the field, and he won't necessarily always wow you as a pure physical specimen, but all he does is use he gets maximum impact out of his brain, his body, his vision, and they can't deal with him.
And go all the way up that organization to the GM, John Lynch. And John Lynch was the same way in the NFL as a safety. I mean, that guy hit the bejesus out of you. Yeah. And, there was no tail of the tape, and, he's faster, can jump higher, anything like that. But he was just a football player. He was out at Stanford and then, in the league, mostly with the Buccaneers. But that guy could just hit. And I'm so glad he's the Niners GM.
Yeah. And speaking of NFL and players that do damage in games, by the way, for me, unless you want to count touchdowns that Mahomes may throw, they may shut him down. That's why we watch the game. But I think that I would pick McCaffrey as the player most likely to end up with the most points in the game. Just think he's that sensational. But the NFL, Dave, NFL's doing damage to both our coaching staffs. I saw Garrett, Auburn's defensive line coach, we really like. He's gone for a great opportunity there. And DeBoer apparently is about to lose his offensive coordinator.
I just read that,
to the NFL, and possibly he'll take the O-line coach with him. There's plenty of great coaches. DeBoer and Freeze both will go find somebody great, but you'd rather not have the disruption heading into spring.
Yeah, guys, we only have about 7 or 8 minutes left. Buddy Martin's on here with us right now. Buddy, let me ask you this. Buddy, you've covered a Super Bowl. Doug Dean, Dave Tompkins, and I talking. The atmosphere at the Super Bowl, the Chiefs and the 49ers in Las Vegas, is that going to be is that a distraction in itself? It's in Las Vegas. I mean, they're trying to make themselves the new Kansas City.
It is what the Super Bowl was supposed to be from the get-go. It was supposed to be showbiz. When Pete Rozelle started it, and I was not the first one, but I was at the second one and many after that. It was all built around the concept of drawing media attention. And the reason they had it in January, and because it was cold everywhere else, they wanted to get all the writers to come there. They made sure they had plenty of interviews. They had big parties. It was a celebration. And it was the kind of thing that Pete Rozelle envisioned, because back then there was no internet. And back then they didn't worry too much about, just TV and what have you. And it was the writers, and all the great writers in the country would come to the Super Bowl. And that's what it was for many years. Now, of course, it's a total different animal. It's over the top. I happen to I'm a Swiftie, by the way, what you want to say about it, but I like it. I like her a lot. I think it adds something to the game. It's showbiz. Now, we're football people, and we don't like to think that way, but this is how America thinks. And on the matter of such things as John Lynch is a friend of mine. I knew him when he played at the Broncos. As you know, my background's in Denver. John and I were did a eulogy for a good friend together when Tommy Vickers, when he died. And you're right, he would hit you. He would definitely hit you.
Yep.
We didn't know he was so smart. Boy, sure. And Kyle Shanahan, his daddy, Mike, when I coached PBU football, Kyle would come with his dad sometimes when he'd come to visit us. And Kyle was like 8 years old, So am I old? Yeah. Do I feel a little older? Yes, I do. But certainly a lot of these names and things, there are people that we've seen before. I don't think they're going to be shutting down Patrick Mahomes. I mean, my colleague here that does radio with me says he might be the greatest quarterback in the history of the game. And Shane Matthews should know. He played 14 years in the league. And he's an amazing guy. I'm amazed he didn't got hurt. Remember that picture of the chunk out of his helmet,
Yeah.
So it worked. Yeah, it worked all right. I almost took his head off. But Mahomes is an amazing athlete. What he does, I don't know. He's the Pete Maravich of quarterbacks. You guys know what I mean when I say Pete Maravich.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
By the way, Friday was 54 years ago that Pete Maravich scored 54 in a game. And by the way, there was no 3-point play and no shot clock. 54. Pete Maravich. So
wow,
amazing. Yeah. So anyway, I'm sort of sorry, Doug. I'm sort of rambling here, but I don't have a real great feel for this game because I don't follow pro football like I used to. But it's the big top. It's the show. It's showtime. It's whatever it is, and I'll go along with the prop bets. I'll pick uh, uh, red as the color for the Gatorade. Better. I mean, whatever. It's all fun. It's football. But by the way, just so you know, right now, if you're honest, much as it pains me to say this, pro football's game is better than the college game right now because it's more entertaining. Doesn't have all the encumbrances, all the problems off the field. So college football's got to get their act together because pro football numbers are going through the roof. And you can be both, but in my house, it was always college football.
Boy, if you want to, put together a sizzle reel and go sell it, as we move sidelines forward, just take Buddy's take there. I mean, that was, thank you, sir. That was, that was fantastic. And I'm thinking back to Super Bowl III and Joe Namath in Miami and stuff, and win on guarantee, and all the writers around him at the pool and stuff.
Right there.
And
right there.
I mean, Pete Rozell's vision has come true. And you're right, the NFL is better.
And Dave, we got to keep remembering whose dream it was. Pete Rozelle. Lamar Hunt had a lot to do with it too, but he knew exactly. He was playing to the audience. He got the right people. He made it the biggest. I mean, the parties we had then, now you don't get to them. They were amazing. The gifts were nice, but the event was incredible. I mean, he gave you every interview you could ever want. At the end of the week, your tongue is hanging out if you're talking to so many people. So yeah, it's I think I covered at 18 or 19. I forgot what it was, but I mean, hey, it will always be America's event, and it is something special. We can find fault with it, the entertainment, the malfunction of the word or whatever, but it is the show. It is the show.
Guys, I only ask one thing of the Super Bowl in terms of the game. Please do not let the zebras decide the outcome.
I agree with that.
And speaking of Patrick Mahomes, so if he wins tomorrow, that's 3 Super Bowls. Wow. I think that ties him with Troy Aikman, and then he's only behind Joe Montana and Terry Bradshaw with 4, and then Tom Brady with 7. So already he's in rarefied air, and he's not even been in the league, 7 years. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and by the way, on behalf of my buddy Terry, who's recuperating nicely at home right now, he likes to remind me, I won 4, but I didn't lose any.
Yeah.
I like that. Hey, look, unbelievable. We have got a shortened version of the show today. Doug Dean, thank you so much for joining us from the hunting camp in Alabama. Dave Tompkins, the Low Country, Beaufort, South Carolina. Brenden Martin, Buddy Martin, awesome take on that. We're live from Charlotte, North Carolina. Got to head out of here to go somewhere in a minute. We'll be back on Monday morning, folks, from Atlanta, as we're taking our tour all over the place. Sidelines is with you. Most often we see the face of Christ in the least among us. We're the most blessed country in the world. We the people make it happen. Go out and do something great for someone you don't even know today. We're out of here.
Go Niners.
Go Bears.